The high country wind cut across the plains like a sharpened blade, pushing long ribbons of dust around the lone wooden cabin in the barren Wyoming night. Tonight, Jonah Briggs, a man who had spent 10 silent years with nothing but cattle and empty horizons, was finally bringing home his mail-order bride. The woman sat upright near the stove, her thick scarf still covering half her face. Firelight flickered across her faded gray dress, revealing calluses and miles that had lived on her skin long before she ever arrived here. Neither of them spoke. Outside, a horse snorted in the stall, and wind groaned through the gaps in the boards. Jonah stood a single step away. He wasn't used to anyone else inside this house, especially not a stranger who had been purchased. His voice was low and rough, like timber scraping across timber. "If you're going to carry my name, I'm not talking to a piece of cloth." Clara Finch didn't answer. She simply reached up, found the knot at the back of her head, and pulled. The scarf fell. Firelight revealed a thin scar across her temple, a clean line from steel and flame. Jonah froze, not in disgust, but in recognition. Her eyes were steady, unflinching, as if she'd grown used to being pitied, and no longer needed anyone to hide her. She spoke quietly but clearly. "I'm not here for pity, Mr. Briggs. I just need a place to work and be left alone." Wind slammed against the cabin, shaking dust from the rafters. Jonah didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then stay. This place has enough silence for the both of us." The fire leaned with the draft, throwing their shadows against the wooden walls. Two strangers, bound not by love, but by a shared hunger for quiet. And somewhere in that small, flickering space, the first breath of trust began. The first morning on the high plains passed quietly, as if even time itself hesitated around two strangers learning the shape of each other's silence. A cold dawn wind pushed through the cabin window, carrying the dry scent of burnt grass and the distant calls of cattle. Clara Finch woke to the soft groan of a rusty door hinge and the slow, measured footsteps of Jonah Briggs on the porch outside. The room she slept in had once belonged to a child. Pencil marks still stained the wall at knee height, and a few wooden toys sat neatly on a shelf. On the small table beside the bed was a cup of water and a piece of cold bread. Jonah must have left it. She took a bite, bland as dust, but warm enough to settle the nerves in her stomach. Outside, Jonah was already working. He hauled bundles of hay, tightening worn ropes around each stack. Every so often, he paused to study the sky, reading the direction of the wind. For 10 years, he had spoken more to cattle than to people. A wife had once shared this space, until she walked out during winter and left behind nothing but walls heavy with silence. Since then, Jonah built his life around tasks that required strength, but no conversation. He never thought of marrying again, not until the day a frightened 7-year-old showed up after losing both parents. Lily, hair the color of wheat, quiet, afraid of thunder. Jonah loved her deeply, but he was clumsy with everything that wasn't a saddle strap or a fence rail. He knew Lily needed a woman's presence, a steady voice, a warmer kind of home. That was the reason he rode to Dustford. Not to find a wife, to find someone Lily could lean on. Before coming west, Clara never believed her life was worth noticing. She grew up back east, in the hammering noise of her father's blacksmith shop. At 17, molten metal jumped from the anvil and kissed her temple, leaving a thin scar down her cheek. The wound healed, the whispers did not. In a small town, a girl with a scar became a superstition. People didn't see Clara anymore. They saw bad luck. Her father coughed all winter, work thinned, money turned into fear. A neighbor told her mother about a mail-order bride registry. They'll send her picture west. Someone might choose her. It would ease the burden. Clara's picture was rejected twice. On the third attempt, they sent it without mentioning the scar. They only wrote that she was kind and hardworking. 1 month later, her mother received a letter. A man named Jonah Briggs from Wyoming inquires. He does not request to see a photograph. Clara looked at her father, then her mother. No one said the word sell. No one had to. She agreed to go. For her father, and perhaps also to escape the place where people refused to see her as anything other than damaged. Jonah later told the story of their meeting with the same gravel in his voice as the land he lived on. I came to buy tack, not a person. But when the clerk spoke about her like she was livestock, I had to walk away with her. I couldn't stomach how they talked about her. The clerk had smirked. She's got a scar, but she works hard. Might last longer than the pretty ones. Jonah didn't argue. He paid. Helped Clara onto the wagon. She didn't look up. He didn't look back. Only wind and dust carried them west, binding two strangers with silence. Now, on their first morning in the cabin, they found themselves in that same silence again. But something about it had changed. Jonah boiled coffee while Clara set out dishes. He asked, "You know how to start a wood stove in this wind?" She answered, "I know, and how to keep a flame steady." Jonah gave a single nod. Not a smile, but the cold edge in his voice softened. At noon, Clara carried cornbread to the porch. She found Lily sitting on the steps, clutching a starving barn cat. The child watched Clara with wary eyes. Clara didn't move closer. She simply set the plate on the table. "If you're hungry, it's warm." Then she walked back inside. Moments later, tiny footsteps approached. The plate was empty except for crumbs. That evening, Lily quietly placed a wilted purple wildflower on the kitchen table. Clara put it in a cracked jar by the window. From the doorway, Jonah watched them both. Something warm flickered in his chest, faint but real, like the first spark in a stubborn pile of kindling. That night, while Clara washed dishes, Jonah sat near the fire, his head bowed, hands clasped. "Thank you for the meal," he murmured. "And for someone to clean up with me." Clara paused, surprised. For the first time in years, she whispered her own prayer. Outside, the western wind shifted, bringing the scent of snow from the mountains. Inside, the fire snapped and breathed, filling the little cabin with the quiet of a beginning neither of them had expected. Two people, both scarred in different ways. One on the skin, one in the heart. And on that first morning, without realizing it, they had already begun to heal. The first days on the ranch slipped by as if time itself forgot to count them. Morning fog pressed low on the grasslands. Sunlight filtered in weak and pale, and dry wind carried the scent of hay and faraway cattle bells. Clara woke before anyone else. She lit the fire, filled a tin pot with coffee, and broke the last piece of cornbread from the night before. Jonah walked in with his hat pulled low and his coat heavy with dew. He did not say good morning. He simply nodded. Yet when he saw the steaming coffee on the stove, something in his expression softened. Sometimes a cup of coffee speaks louder than words. On the third day, he led her to the cattle barn. The heavy door creaked open, and cold dust swirled around their boots. Cattle shifted in the dim light, snorting steam into the morning air. Jonah pointed to the tools and spoke slowly. "This bucket is for milk. The smaller one is for washing wounds. If one kicks, stand on its left side." Clara listened carefully, then asked, "Do you want me to handle just the housework, or help out here too?" "Everyone learns to survive here," he said. "This land has no room for people who are afraid to get their hands dirty." She nodded, fingers tightening around the rope, her eyes steady. Jonah glanced at her and saw something both fragile and unbreakable, like metal after the fire. Around noon, Clara carried water to the porch. Lily sat at the base of a cottonwood tree, hugging a thin, stray cat. The girl looked up, wary as always. Clara didn't approach. She simply sat on the step and let the quiet settle around them. After a moment, she said, "When I was your age, I had a cat too. Whenever my father swung his hammer, she hid under the workbench and covered her ears with her paws." Lily blinked. Was she scared? Yes, but she always came back, because she knew the hammer wasn't meant for her. Lily smiled, the first smile since Clara arrived. That evening, a tiny purple wildflower appeared in a chipped jar on the kitchen table. No note, no words, but Clara knew exactly who left it. Wind howled against the windows that night. Jonah sat near the fire, patching an old saddle. Clara peeled potatoes and chopped onions, the room filled with the warm smell of food. No one spoke, only the crack of the fire and the rhythm of her knife on the cutting board. When Clara placed dinner on the table, Jonah bowed his head. "Thank you, Lord, for the meal and for someone who knows how to make it." Clara paused. No one had ever thanked her for cooking, least of all a man. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt like warmth moving in from the doorway, slow and patient. Days shaped themselves into a rhythm. Morning. Clara aired the bedding, swept the floor, heated water. Midday. Jonah chopped wood and taught her how to mend fences and read wolf tracks. Afternoon. Lily practiced letters at the kitchen table while Clara worked nearby with needle and thread. Jonah sometimes stopped in the doorway and stared, realizing that the house which once held only wind now held the scratch of pencils, the rustle of fabric, the scent of soap. One evening, as Clara stirred the fire, Jonah murmured, "It has been a long time since smoke smelled like home." "How can smoke smell pleasant?" she asked. "Because it means someone lives here." Another day, they walked to the creek to fetch water. Spring cold sat heavy in the air. Clara stepped onto a slick rock, slipped, and Jonah caught her hand just in time. The grip was brief, but his hand was warmer than the fire at home. "Thank you," she whispered. He glanced at the scar on her temple and asked, "People call that ugly?" She hesitated. "To them, yes. To me," he said quietly, "it looks like proof. Anything that survives the fire lasts longer." After that, Clara stopped covering her face when the wind rose. Later, a storm hit. Thunder cracked hard enough to shake the walls. Lily hid under the table, trembling. Jonah was still outside with the cattle. Clara knelt beside the girl and wrapped her arms around her. "It's all right. That sound is just the earth turning." She hummed an old lullaby from back east. "Sleep, little one. The wind only visits the roof. The thunder only tells the sky that rain has come." When Jonah came inside, rain dripping down his coat, he stopped in the doorway. Two people sat curled near the fire. For the first time in years, his house did not look empty. Days flowed into weeks. Lily laughed more, Clara sang more, Jonah spoke a little more at every meal. Sometimes, at dusk, the three of them sat on the porch, watching cattle drift back from pasture. "Do you ever get tired of this land?" Clara asked. "Yes," Jonah answered. "But if I left it, I don't think I'd know how to live." She smiled. "I think I'm starting to understand." He turned his head toward her. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Rare, uneasy, genuine. At the end of the month, as Clara cleared the dinner table, Lily whispered, "Miss Clara, I think the house isn't sad anymore." Clara looked up. "Really?" "Because now it smells like bread and singing." Clara laughed softly and brushed a curl from the girl's cheek. Outside, the moon hung low over the quiet pasture. Jonah sat on the porch, listening to Clara's voice drifting from the kitchen. It wasn't a morning song. It was warm, full, alive. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm. Sometimes it sounds like a knife tapping a cutting board, smells like fresh bread, and feels like a voice that makes the wind leave your heart. March came, and the wind in Dustford shifted. Heavy moisture hung in the air like a warning. Clouds dragged low over the plains. The ground smelled of heated iron, and in the pens, the cattle stirred earlier than usual. Jonah woke before dawn, studying the gray sky. Spring storms coming in early. Clara looked up from the stove, firelight reflecting in her eyes. "Is it dangerous?" "Not if the fences hold, but cattle don't always listen." She nodded. More than 2 months had passed since she arrived, and now the harsh sounds of the west, the wind, the lowing cattle, the hammering of fence posts, no longer made her feel like a stranger. That afternoon, Jonah asked her to ride with him into Dustford for salt, nails, and canvas. Lily begged to come so she could see the spring fair. The town was louder than Clara remembered. Tobacco smoke, leather, sweat, and whiskey blurred together. People stared as Jonah walked through with a scarred mail-order bride at his side. Whispered voices slipped through the air like cold drafts through old boards. "There, that's Briggs' bride. He got her cheap, like buying a used saddle. Look at that face, bold of her to show up in town." Clara heard every word, but she kept her chin high. Lily squeezed her hand tight. Jonah walked on the outside, silent, shoulders angled as if shielding them from the wind. Inside the general store, amid the noise of buying and bartering, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Clara Finch, is that really you?" She turned. A well-dressed man in a long black coat stood there, Samuel Kerr, the man who once promised to marry her. His eyes flicked to her scar, a hesitation, then a polite smile stretched across his face. "I didn't expect to see you here." Clara replied quietly. "Neither did I." Jonah stepped forward, voice flat. "You know this man?" "I used to," she said. "There's nothing left to say." Samuel tried a polite chuckle, but Jonah cut him off. "Then don't." The entire shop froze for a heartbeat. Kerr backed away, pretending to examine bolts of fabric. Clara walked on, heart pounding, not from fear, from the sharp sting of memories she thought she had buried. The smell of the forge, the laughter, the words, "Who would marry a girl with a scar?" Rain came fast on the ride home. Thick drops slammed the metal roof as soon as they reached the ranch. "Storm's close," Jonah said. "We need to get the cattle into the barn." He rode back into the storm with the hands, leaving Clara and Lily inside. Wind howled like something alive. The house shuddered. Rain forced its way through gaps in the wood. Clara fed the fire and told Lily to crawl beneath the table if lightning struck nearby. Darkness swallowed the ranch. The storm raged for hours. Clara held Lily tight and prayed Jonah wouldn't be the next thing the storm decided to take. Near dawn, hoofbeats thundered toward the house. Clara threw the door open. Wind ripped her hair back as Jonah stumbled off his horse, coat torn, blood soaking his shoulder. "Cattle are safe," he rasped. Big Bull charged. I stopped him, but he caught me. She caught him before he fell, dragging him inside. Blood ran down her arms as she cleaned his wound. When the needle touched his skin, Jonah clenched his jaw. Clara's voice trembled, but held firm. "If you die out there, who's going to take care of Lily? Who keeps this house standing?" Jonah stared at her. Firelight reflected in her eyes, wet, steady, fierce. "You care about me?" "No," she whispered. "I care about what's starting here." Silence. Only the storm tapping against the roof while the two of them saw each other clearly for the very first time. 3 days passed before the sky cleared. Jonah still moved stiffly, so Clara took on everything, feeding cattle, scrubbing dishes, cooking meals, until her hands cracked and bled. Lily followed her everywhere, helping however she could. One afternoon, a rider brought mail. Clara opened the envelope and her heart broke at the handwriting she knew too well. It was from her mother. "Your father is failing. The doctor says he won't survive the winter. A wealthy relative in Boston offered to help if you return to care for him. There will be inheritance if we do things properly. Come home. Don't let him die without seeing you." The ink was smeared with tears. Jonah walked in and saw her standing motionless, letter shaking in her hands. "Bad news?" She didn't look up. "My father is dying." Jonah said softly, "I'm sorry." Clara swallowed hard. "He taught me to shape metal. He used to say, 'Anything that survives the fire is worth keeping.' I thought that was true of me too, until now." She folded the letter and set it on the table. "If I leave, it may be a long time. If I come back at all." Jonah's hand tightened at his side. He wanted to argue, wanted to ask her to stay. Instead, he said, voice low, "The East is your home. This is only a resting place." Clara shook her head. "No, home is where someone misses you." They stared at each other in the fading light. Sunset washed her scar in gold, and both understood that the peace they had built in this house would never be the same again. That night, Clara sat by the fire, watching flames eat through the wood. Outside, the wind rose again. Inside her chest, two loyalties tore at each other, blood and duty, or this house and the people who made it warm. No matter what she chose, there would be a scar, maybe deeper than the one on her skin. The next morning, Jonah left a small knife on the table, sharpened, polished, the initials CF carved into the handle. "Made it last night," he said. "For the road, if you go." Clara stared at him. "You think I'm leaving?" He met her eyes. Pride and sorrow mixed in his voice. "I think someone with your kind of loyalty doesn't run from responsibility. But if you go or stay, Lily and I will remember the smell of your bread more than anything else." Clara didn't smile. She only touched the knife. Cold, solid, real. Outside, black clouds gathered again. The wind rose, same as the day they met. But this time the storm wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the choices beating inside their hearts. That evening, the sky was clear in a strange, almost sacred way, as if the storm had swept everything aside to make room for silence before the real damage arrived. Clara stood by the fence watching the cattle graze. Lily was farther down by the creek, collecting stones and humming to herself. a soft little sound carried by the wind. Jonah walked up beside her, resting one hand on the post. "You're really leaving?" "I don't know," she said, eyes on Lily. "My mother is begging for me to come home, and my father, he may not make it." "He was a blacksmith, right?" "Yes. He taught me to forge a blade, and he taught me that a person should live in a way where death comes without shame." Jonah was quiet for a moment. Then he probably wants you there." She finally turned to look at him, sunlight brushing her scar like a soft touch. "And what about you, Jonah? What about Lily? If I leave, who's going to take care of her?" "I lived 10 years with wind and cattle," he said, voice low. "I'll manage." "But she won't." Jonah lowered his head, gripping the fence until his knuckles went white. The wind carried the smell of damp dirt and hay, filling the space between them. "I don't want you to go," he admitted quietly. "But I don't want you to regret staying either." Clara swallowed hard. "If I leave, I don't know if I'll make it back. It's far, I don't have much money, and the world isn't kind to a woman traveling alone." Jonah looked at her for a long time. "Then let me take you to the coach station. I don't want your last journey to begin with fear." Lily overheard and ran off behind the barn. Clara found her later, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red. "You're leaving us, aren't you?" Lily whispered. "Just like my parents left and never came back." Clara knelt and wrapped her arms around her. Tears slipped into the child's tangled blonde hair. "No, sweetheart, I'm not leaving you. My father is waiting, and if I don't go, he'll die wishing he had seen me. But no matter where I am, I'll think of you. What do I do when I miss you?" "Sing," Clara said, brushing tears from her cheeks. "Sing the song I taught you. When you sing it, I'll hear you, no matter how far." Lily nodded, shaking. Far behind them, Jonah turned away. He could stand against storms and bulls, but not the sight of 2 girls crying. Night came. No wind. Pale moon. Inside the cabin, Clara folded her clothes into a small canvas bag. A simple dress, a shawl, the knife Jonah made her. Lily fell asleep in a chair, head resting on Jonah's arm. Clara watched the scene for a long time before speaking. "You should sleep. I'll finish packing." Jonah didn't answer. He walked to her and pulled a small bundle from his pocket. "This," he said. "I found it in my sister's old chest. Take it, in case the east is colder than you remember." Clara unfolded the bundle, a gray wool shawl, worn but clean. Her breath caught. "You have a way of making people cry without saying much." Jonah lowered his gaze. "If you stay, I'd be glad. But if you go, I'll understand. Just don't forget that you were seen here, without hiding." Clara stepped closer, lifting her chin, firelight reflected in both their eyes. "You know, that first day when I dropped the scarf and you saw the scar, I expected disgust, but you said it looked like steel that had survived fire. After that, I wasn't afraid of mirrors anymore." Jonah raised a hand and touched the edge of her scar, gently, like he was holding a feather. "It took me years to get used to silence, Clara. Might take just as long to learn how to live with it after you're gone." "You won't be alone," she whispered. "You'll have Lily, and you'll have this fire." They stood in a long quiet, the kind that says more than words ever could. "I want to say something better," Jonah murmured, "but my words are rough." "Then don't speak," she breathed. "Just remember." Later they sat on the porch under the moon. Lily slept inside, Jonah opened an old bottle of whiskey, poured 2 cups, handed her one. My father used to say a man doesn't understand the value of fire until he's lived through ice. Clara smiled softly. My father used to say steel only shines if the blacksmith knows pain. Jonah chuckled under his breath. Those 2 men might have gotten along. She nodded. Maybe, but they lived in different worlds. They tapped cups. The whiskey was harsh. The silence, harsher. Before they went inside, Clara turned. If I come back someday, will you still be here? Jonah met her eyes, moonlight caught in the dark of them. If the mountain stands and the wind still blows, I'll be here. And if I don't come back? He didn't blink. I'll still be here. Clara let out a shaky laugh. You really don't know how to lie. I do, he said, but not to you. Later, lying in bed, she listened to the sounds of the night. The horses, the wind, Jonah's steady breathing through the thin wall. She remembered Lily's first smile. The storm. Jonah's hand catching her when she slipped on the river stones. If she left, nobody would call her scarred bride anymore. But she doubted anyone would ever look at her again the way Jonah had, as if true beauty didn't need to be beautiful at all. She breathed out slowly. Maybe love doesn't always mean staying, she whispered into the darkness. Outside, the moon hung high. The wind carried the faint clink of cattle bells, and the western night, quiet, ancient, and merciless, witnessed everything. That morning, the fog was so thick, the whole field looked like it had been swallowed by a white curtain. Clara stepped onto the porch, wrapped in the gray shawl Jonah had given her. The horse was saddled, a small travel bag strapped to the wagon. Dew clung to the wooden wheels like silver dust. Lily stood beside Jonah, her eyes swollen from crying. Jonah tightened the rope on the wagon. No one spoke. Only the sound of the reins and the wind brushing against the fence posts. Clara knelt and tucked a stray curl behind Lily's ear. Be good, all right? Help Jonah keep the house clean. Don't forget to water the flowers. Will you come back? Lily whispered, staring at Clara's hands. If the road stays open and the sky allows it. And if it doesn't? Clara smiled, tears slipping down her face. Then you sing. Let the wind carry your song to me. She stood and looked at Jonah. No embrace, no dramatic goodbye. Just a single nod, heavy as a mountain behind them. Jonah's voice was low and rough. If anyone asks where you lived, just tell them. Somewhere with wind and real people. Clara's smile trembled. And if someone asks whether you've ever loved anyone? Jonah stared into the fog where the dirt road disappeared. I'll say, there was someone, but the wind carried her away before I could speak. She climbed onto the wagon. The wheels rolled, slow and reluctant, fading into the mist. Jonah stayed where he stood, one hand gripping the fence. Lily tugged his sleeve. She's gone. He nodded without looking away from the hills. Yeah, but she left this place warmer than she found it. Time moved like a spring river. Steady, never backwards. Clara reached the east in time to hold her father's hand before he passed. He died on a cold morning, surrounded by the smell of cooling iron and a hammer's fading echo. Her mother, weakened by grief, aged as quickly as winter. Clara stayed. She opened a tiny bakery near the train station, where travelers bought cornbread and coffee before boarding the morning train. On the bakery wall hung a charcoal sketch, a cabin in a field, cattle grazing under a golden sky. Beneath it, Clara had written in small script, for those who taught me that silence can be kind. Customers often asked, "Where's that place?" Clara would only smile. "Somewhere the wind lives." Years later, during a rare summer rain, Jonah received a letter from the east. He recognized the handwriting immediately. "Jonah, I don't know if you remember, but I kept the knife you forged. I use it every morning to slice bread. My mother says it's a knife that cuts peace, not danger. I tell customers about a land where the wind makes people strong without making them hard. And if you ever hear someone singing a lullaby out on the fields, know that I'm still singing for Lily." Clara Finch. Jonah sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sunset spill gold across the boards. He didn't write back, not because he didn't want to, but because some things are only beautiful when left unfinished. He folded the letter and placed it in an old tin box, next to the knife carved with her initials. When the wind blew across the porch, the metal lid vibrated, a thin, trembling note like a string being plucked. Sometimes it sounded like singing. The next season, people noticed Lily had grown, steady and bright, like someone who had learned how to stand in the wind. Travelers passing through the ranch often heard her say, "Jonah told me once, even a kitchen fire remembers the hands that tended it." Jonah would sit outside at dusk, staring toward the western horizon where the sun hesitated before slipping behind the ridges. He'd smile to himself and whisper, "You left at the right time, Clara. If you'd stayed, I might have forgotten how to appreciate the quiet." That night, the moon rose so bright it gave every shape a silver outline. Jonah sat on the porch steps, holding the worn gray shawl. The wind carried a faint scent, cornbread, or maybe memory. He closed his eyes and swore he could hear someone speaking his name from very, very far away. Some stories don't need a happily ever after to be complete. What remains isn't the person, it's the trace of the kindness they left behind. In the West, there were loves that never became marriages, but they still taught two people how not to fear the wind. If this story reminded you of someone who once passed through your life, someone you couldn't hold on to, but who made you a gentler person, leave a comment and tell us. Out in the wind and dust, have you ever let someone go and still felt at peace? And if you believe that sometimes letting go is a form of love, tap like and subscribe. So every night between the wind and the firelight, you'll have another Western story that reaches straight to the heart.